There are 40 undefeated wrestlers right now going into the NCAA Championships. Can you believe that? 40 undefeated wrestlers? 40. I'm going to break down these stats to you for everything you need to know about these undefeated wrestlers. So I'm going to be breaking it down by the best records, by which conference has the most undefeated wrestlers, which school has the most undefeated wrestlers, and which weight has the most undefeated wrestlers. And at the end of this video, I'm actually going to break down the updated winning streaks. This is something that I haven't seen anywhere else updated, and so I wanted to update it for you. I did the research. I did the tough research today about who has the longest winning streaks, active winning streaks right now in the NCAA, and I'll be dropping that for you. So first of all, let's talk about the best records in the NCAA right now. Brock Mauler is 17-0, the MAC champ, with his best win over Abu Lawalin of Okie State, has the best record in the NCAA. And it's impressive that he has such a dominant record, 17 wins, because it's a shortened season. You see a couple of these guys, I mean, they may be 5-0, 6-0. I mean, honestly, a lot of these Big Ten guys are like 6 or 7-0, right? But Brock Mauler's 17-0. Demetrius Romero, who just got the number 2 seed at his weight, is 16-0. An under-the-radar guy from Utah Valley, won the Big 12s, has wins over Mantanona and Bernie Traw of Cal Poly. I'm sorry for if I'm mispronouncing that name. I've done research on a couple of these names and just don't exactly know how to pronounce that last name. But he's the number 2 seed at his weight. It's Demetrius Romero. David Carr is 15-0, and I'll get into an interesting fact about 157 when it comes to undefeated wrestlers, because there's some very interesting things happening there. 73% bonus point percentage for David Carr, and he's looking for that highly rematch in the semifinals. Keegan O'Toole is 13-0, the young wrestler, the young freshman. Parker Keckeisen, also 13-0, another young guy. Both these guys undefeated so far this season. And then we have a couple guys tied at number 12, or for the number 5 spot at 12-0. Cody Tribus of Navy, Sammy Sasso, Austin Murphy of Campbell, Gable Steveson of Minnesota, and Colton Schultz, also an undefeated wrestler. Each of these guys is 12-0. One thing to note before we move on to the undefeated freshman wrestlers, which, I find completely impressive. The lowest ranked wrestler, the lowest seeded wrestler right now, who is an undefeated conference champion, who I had to mention as I was doing the stats, the only undefeated conference champion not seeded by Flow Wrestling right now is Chris Cober of Campbell, which I found kind of interesting that for whatever reason, not ranked. I mean, just wanted to throw that out there. I also want to talk about undefeated wrestlers. So, and trust me, I have some very fun tables coming up at you soon. If you're watching live on YouTube, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, you're not seeing the tables, but I'll still be breaking down all the stats for you. Number 2 seed, Sam Latona at 125 is 10-0, and this is a guy that pulls off big wins. You look at his big wins over Jacob Camacho, which happened in the duel. It happened at ACCs. He's a guy that's great under pressure, and we'll see how he does. You know, it's going to be tough to stay undefeated for him in a weight with Spencer Lee, but he's having a great season so far. And could stay undefeated up until the semis. I mean, if his only loss this season is to Spencer Lee, you better watch out in the future. I'm just saying. 2 Mizzou wrestlers, freshmen, also undefeated. Keegan O'Toole, who I already mentioned, the true freshman, who his wins haven't come from anybody ranked, but he is a MAC champ, and he is at 165, which I've said is the toughest weight. Rocky Elam, also at 197, is 11-0. I've mentioned Parker Keckeisen already, the other undefeated freshman wrestler of Northern Iowa at 184 pounds, Big 12 champion. Jarrett Lane is in EIWA, 8-0. Some other freshmen that I want to mention, Jarrett Lane of EIWA. Ben Pasiuk of Army. Another name, I'm sorry, I tried finding the pronunciation for it. Pasiuk, I believe, is the way to pronounce it. 5-0. And Colton Schultz of Arizona State, 12-0 this season. So, great work by the freshmen. How many freshmen do you think will stay undefeated at the end of the year? I mean, there is an undefeated guy at every single weight. So, there's a possibility that we get 10 undefeated NCAA champions. I think that a couple years ago, those came into, we actually had an undefeated, 10 undefeated seeds come into the NCAA championships, and only a couple remained. There's always upsets. There are always upsets. The most by conference, you're probably not surprised by this, Big Ten. All their number one seeds, all the guys who won Big Tens are undefeated. They have the most. Next, EIWA has 7 undefeated wrestlers, and there's been a lot going on about the EIWA. You know, the thing about it is people are upset because they had the most the most seeds, the most at-large bids, the most automatic qualifiers, for the NCAA championships, even though they didn't have a lot of the Ivy League schools, but they still have 7 undefeated wrestlers. It's still a tough conference this year. MAC and ACC each had 6. The Pac-12 has 5 undefeated wrestlers. Big 12 has 4, and 2 from the SoCon, both from the same school of Campbell University. And the most by any school is actually Iowa. Now you have Spencer Liu 7-0, Jayden Ironman 8-0, Alex Marinelli 5-0. Like I said, they don't have the crazy 17-0 records like Brock Mauler. Maybe in another year, yeah, but not this year. And Michael Kemmer, who is 7-0. Each of these guys is the number 1 seed for the Iowa Hawkeyes at the NCAA Championships. They're all seniors, and they're all going to get their shots. A lot of them got their shots at the potential number 2s at the Big Ten Championships. So, kind of tough. The most impressive to me out of those guys is Jayden Ironman, who beat Nick Lee in the Big Ten Championships. Michael Kemmer, who beat Massa and then Srirachi at Big Tens. Most impressive there. The other school I wanted to talk about is who actually has a few undefeated wrestlers. 4 undefeated wrestlers in Colton Schultz at heavyweight, who I mentioned. Brandon Courtney, who is 11-0. Anthony Valencia, who is 10-0. And Cordell Norfleet, who is undefeated at 9-0. And Valencia is probably the most impressive here because at the Pac-12s, he majored Shane Griffith, who was another undefeated wrestler who had one of the highest records in winning streaks going into here, but it's not the longest remaining. I'll get into that in a second. NC State and Mizzou each have 3 undefeated wrestlers for them. Are you a fan of these stats? You know, I spend my time looking at a lot of these stats, looking at spreadsheets. I'm a spreadsheet guy. Love looking at all the different possibilities. You should see my NCAA list and the algorithm that I have going on for the points there. It's awesome. But the most by weight, and then I'll get into the winning streaks. So the most by weight, did you know? It's 125 and 157. 125 is Spencer Lee, Drew Hildebrandt, Brandon Courtney, Jarrett Lane, and Sam Latona, each undefeated at their weight. The next is 157, whose top 4 seeds are all undefeated. Ryan Deacon, Hayden Hiley, David Carr, and De La Vecchia are all undefeated. 1, 2, 3, 4 undefeated wrestlers. I would love to see all those semis happen. All seniors, actually, except for David Carr. And interestingly enough, each of these guys are in the nation's longest winning streaks currently active. So what are the longest winning streaks? Now, the first guy here on the list is actually not even wrestling in college this year. The rest of them are, but not the number 1 guy, who is Yanni Diakomahalis. Yanni Diakomahalis has 47 straight wins. Has almost going to crack 50. Wish that he could this year. 50 straight wins. But number 2, who just overpassed in the last month, is Brock Mauler. Brock Mauler has 33 straight wins, who overtook Spencer Lee's 30 straight wins. After that, Gable Stevenson, 29. David Carr at 28. And this is the crazy part that I was talking about with these guys. David Carr, 28. Ryan Deacon, 27. And Hayden Hiley, 25 straight wins. After that, Pat Glory, also not wrestling this season, of Princeton, at 24 straight wins. Matt Stencil, 23. And tied for 10th for the longest winning streaks currently active are Austin O'Connor with 22 and Drew Hildebrandt with 22. So a couple of Central Michigan guys there in that bottom half. Kind of cool to see that happen. How many of these guys, my question for you is, how many of these guys will stay undefeated after the NCAA championship? Maybe we'll do another look at the active win streaks after the championships end. If you like this clip and are looking for more wrestling news and discussion, I recommend that you check out the full Fanco Wrestling Show podcast, which is live on this YouTube channel every single week. You can click here to subscribe to be notified of new and upcoming videos, or you can check out the Fanco Wrestling Show on your favorite podcasting platform to listen on the go. Stop stalling and start listening today.